right? And so we end up doing what Brazilian educator Paulo Freire called the banking model of education, right? Which is just this idea where the expert stands in front of the room and makes deposits like a bank into the brains of the students and then asks for withdrawals at test time, right? And that's not a productive way to do schooling. It's not a liberatory way to do schooling. So, I think you can change some of those folks, but I think the better time management is spent trying to bring in as many new people as possible and change the cohort that way, from the ground up. And I think that when you begin to do that, some of the folks who've been around a while will either change or they'll sort of select out of their careers. Hopefully they'll adapt, because they might have a lot of great things to offer and to share. They just need to be pushed a little bit, and they need to see what it could look like. And when you bring in some new people, they get a chance to see what it could look like and how it can be different. Other questions? If there are some. You can either come up or just raise your hand.
I have one.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with startup technology founders, and I've been trying to explain often that they need not compare themselves to another founder they might see who they don't realize is funded by their parents. And so they seem to be having all of this success. How do you balance explaining that reality with the reality that sometimes people do break through? There's the founder of WhatsApp, who was on welfare and sold the company to Facebook and is a true main story, but the reality is this story tale of startup founders who build these incredible companies. That's just not reality. This is just passed down wealth with a new tech, bow on it.
Well, let's just put it this way. I think the most important asset that we can bring to anything we do, and it's hard sometimes in this culture, because this culture encourages the exact opposite of what I'm getting ready to say, is radical humility, right? Our culture is not rooted in humility. Our culture is rooted in this notion of rugged individualism and meritocracy and taking credit for things even if you didn't do them, and it really is. And because we're a hyper-competitive capitalist system, that sort of puts a premium on that kind of narrative. And we love that story in this country, right? We love that self-made story because it reinforces the idea of America as this fundamentally good and just place. Now here's the problem. Number one, it is a lie. There is nobody, including the guy that founded WhatsApp, who is self-made. Nobody's self-made. He may have been on welfare, but he wasn't raised on an island by a porpoise, right? He wasn't. He had parents, he had teachers. Before he was on welfare, he had teachers, he had mentors, he had somebody that believed in him at some point. No one was raised on an island by a porpoise. They would have no language if they were. They would not know, they wouldn't be able to get tech startup money. They'd go into the meeting and eat the person with the money because they wouldn't have any idea. Nobody would have told them, don't do that. You don't eat people. Nobody would have told them. So you cannot, no one should say they're self-made. When people say, I came from nothing, no, that's crap. You didn't come from nothing. Nobody's self-made. There's no such thing as a rugged individual. There's no such thing as an individual. We've all had people. We've all had help, some more than others, right? So whether it's handed down money, right? Whether it's the president who over the course of his life got $400 million in cash and prizes from his dad, he was a millionaire by the time he was 8, right? Wants us to believe he only got one small $1 million loan from his dad, which is not small, by the way, but that's not even right. $400 million worth of cash and prizes, was making $200,000 a year from an account when he was 3 years old, right? Wants us to believe he's self-made. Whether it's him or whether it's the WhatsApp person or whether it's the founder, anybody in Silicon Valley, whether it's somebody that just starts their own small business and makes a couple $100,000 a year, never becomes a billionaire but does well for themselves and their family. Nobody did anything on their own. So we need some radical humility, because here's why that's important. If I'm humble enough to admit that my success is not just about me, then it's going to be really hard to look down on someone else when they're not successful or not successful yet, right? Because I know that I could be them and that they could be me. Like, I can't judge you for not quite being where I'm at if I realize, like, I could have really easily not been where I'm at. So part of what we got to do is get clear on our own narrative and our own story and stop lying to ourselves, because we're encouraged to lie and take credit for stuff that we didn't do and not give credit where it's due. So I'm just going to tell you my story as a model, and you can do this. You got a model. You're going to tell people to do stuff. You got to model it. It's not fair to just tell you to do it and then I don't do it. So here's the thing. I am not here doing this right now because I am the best speaker or writer. I'm decent. Like, my mom would tell you, I talk real good. Like, I talk pretty good, and I can write okay. But But there are a lot of people that can speak just as well or better. There are people that write just as well or better. They're not up here today. I am, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've received a certain degree of renown for it, so good for me. Now, this society tells me I should take credit for that. And my mom would want me to take credit for that, and she would want some credit for that. But it's not really about that. I mean, it's about that a little bit, sure, but it's also about some other stuff. And I could get into some of the racial aspect and the white privilege piece of it, but I'm not even going to go into that. I'm going to leave that to the side and just talk about luck. See, we don't like to talk about luck, right? Because nobody wants to admit, people say things, then you'll hear people say, I don't believe in luck. There's no such thing as luck. Oh, really? There's not? There's not such a thing as luck? No, we make our own luck. Oh, really? So the fact that there are 3.5 billion people on the planet who don't have enough food to eat tonight isn't just their shitty luck, like they did something to deserve that, and you did something not to deserve that? That seems awfully cruel to me. Seems to me you're suggesting that you did something maybe in a previous life to end up in the place that you are now, and they did something horrible which put them at basic starvation level. That seems ridiculous to me. Of course there's luck. Of course there's stuff you don't control, but nobody wants to admit it because then that makes us afraid, right? Because if we admit there's luck, and maybe we've had good luck up to now, that means luck could turn south and go all to hell next week. So we just want to act like that would never happen. But it can, and so here's my story. So basically I'm doing what I'm doing for 30 years because right when I got out of college, I got a job doing probably the highest profile anti-racism work at the time, which was in New Orleans, when David Duke, former Klan leader, white supremacist, neo-Nazi, was running for the United States Senate. I got a job in the campaigns against him. I was the associate director of the group that was formed for the purpose of defeating him when he ran for Senate and when he ran for governor. If you were doing that job, which I was, any of us in that organization got a lot of attention from the media because it was a big deal. This Nazi was on the verge of becoming a US Senator. I mean, he got 60% of the white vote and almost won, got 44% of the vote overall. And then when he ran for governor, he only got 39% of the vote, which is still a lot, but he got 55% of the white vote. He got the majority of white people, so that was a huge story, right? And those of us who were involved in fighting him obviously got a lot of attention. That attention is what allowed me to launch my career, as it were. Now, how did I get that job? Well, I got that job the old-fashioned way. I knew the two guys who had it to offer. One was a history professor of mine at Tulane, and the other was a graduate student friend of mine at Tulane. If I don't go to Tulane, I don't know these guys. They don't offer me that job. I don't get to fight David Duke and build up this reputation and get out on the lecture circuit and all this stuff I've done. Why was I at Tulane, without which I couldn't have known them? I was only at Tulane for one reason, y'all. I went to college because I was chasing a girl that went to Louisiana State. True story. I met this girl during a summer debate workshop, debate camp, at American University in Washington, D.C. She lived in Lafayette, Louisiana. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. We met at debate camp and in the manner of stupid 16-year-olds fell in love, right? And then she says to me, because I wasn't thinking about Tulane. I'd never even thought of, Tulane wasn't even on my radar at all. I was going to go to Emory in Atlanta. I was going to debate for them. They were recruiting me. They were going to give me a debate scholarship. That's where I was going. She says, no. You can't go to Emory. If you go to Emory, we'll never see each other. You'll be in Atlanta, I'll be in Baton Rouge. That's not going to work. You got to go to Tulane. It's only an hour and 15 minutes away. It'll be much better. I said, oh, okay. So I changed my entire life trajectory for this girl. It didn't work out, but it did, didn't it? Because it got me to Tulane. If I don't know her, I don't go to Tulane, I don't meet those men, I don't get that job, I don't build up that reputation. But let's even take it deeper. How did I know her? I knew her only because I went to that particular debate camp. There are lots of them, right? I happen to go to that one. If I go to any other camp, I don't meet her. And the only reason I would have even been at debate camp is because I had chosen to be a debater. And you may think, listening to me tonight, that that was an inevitable outcome. That I came out of the womb debating and running my mouth. This is not true. That was not going to be my path when I was young. I didn't think. I was actually a jock. I was a baseball player. I thought that was going to be my path. I was really good at baseball. And that was what I used to have, like college recruiters at my Little League games. Now, I don't want to brag because I want to be clear. I wasn't as good, I don't know if you know this, as Donald Trump. Donald Trump says, and why would I question it? Donald Trump says he was the best baseball player in the city of New York in 1962. For those of you who are baseball historians, you might recall that the New York Yankees won the World Series in 1962, but apparently Donald Trump would want you to know that he was better than Mickey Mantle, and he was better than Roger Maris, and he was better than Whitey Ford, and he was better than Yogi Berra, he was better than all those guys. So I wasn't Donald Trump good, but I was good. I was good. And I was convinced that that was going to be my path. But then this weird thing happened. I tried out for my high school team. And by all rights, the other guys that were trying out, I'd been better than them all through Little League, you know. But I had a horrible, horrible tryout. Just inexplicable, like I'd never played ball before. Like I couldn't hit, I couldn't field ground balls, like I forgot how to catch. I don't know what was wrong. I just was so nervous, I freaked, and it happens, right? Like, you might know the story, Michael Jordan got cut the first time he tried out for his high school basketball team, and I'm not saying I was like the Michael Jordan of basketball. For God's sake, I was not even close to that good. I wasn't even Donald Trump good, I already told you, but I was really good, and I just had a horrible tryout, and so I got cut. I got cut. And once I got cut, I had to find a new activity, right? Because if I make the team, which by all rights I should have, given my skill set previously for all those years, I wouldn't have been at a debate camp during the summer. I would have been on a ball field playing ball. And I never would have met Monica, and I never would have gone to Tulane, and I never would have met those men, and I never would have gotten that job, right? And I told my kids this story because I can then take it all the way into the future and explain how they wouldn't exist. Like, literally wouldn't exist. Like, their existence and my existence here really all goes back to that asshole who cut me from the baseball team. That's the point that I guess I'm trying to say, right? So it's not even, when I say luck, I don't even mean good luck. Sometimes it's bad luck. Sometimes it's something that you think is the worst thing that ever happened to you, and it turns out that it opens other doors. That's just serendipity. I had no control over that. And the fact that I can joke about it and be humble about it, it made my kids freaked out. Like, they were crying. I told them the story. I'm like, you don't know how lucky you are. Let me tell you, all the stuff that could have gone wrong. One of these things goes wrong, and you don't exist. And they were like 11 and 9 when I did this. I was not Father of the Year that year, you can imagine. They're in the back seat like, Dad, why are you telling us this? Because you need to know. That's why you need to know, because you got to be humble. You're only 11 and 9. I don't know why you need to be humble, but we need to be humble, right? We have to have a certain degree of radical humility, and I think if we do that, right, it's so hard to look down on folks that are struggling. Because you look at them and you realize that really could be you, and they could be where you are, and you could be where they are. And so I think a little of that would be really helpful, not just for the Donald Trumps of the world and the Silicon Valley tech bros of the world, but I mean just for all of us. We have all had help, and if we remember that, then we can remember to be the help for somebody else. But I'm never going to remember to be your help if I don't remember the people that helped me, and if I don't give them credit where credit is due, and then I forget to pass that along, right? And that's something that we can all do. We can all, you know, you might not have a lot of power, you might not have a lot of influence or money that you can feel you can change the world with, but one thing you can do is if you start telling a different story about yourself and how you've got to where you have gotten, it does change it changes the world around you a little bit, because people, you start sharing that story, you start sharing the truth with people, and then they feel like they can share theirs. Nobody ever wants to go first. That's the problem. Like, people don't want to admit their frailty because you haven't admitted yours yet, right? So if I admit my frailty, if I admit that I've got biases and prejudice that I've had ingrained in me, or if I admit that I've had privilege of some kind, or if I admit that I've had, you know, help that maybe I didn't deserve or earn, then I feel like you're going to judge me or you're going to jump down my throat. But that's the beauty of it. If I go first, right, and just tell you all that stuff about myself, and I make myself vulnerable, I've just given you permission to share whatever it is you might be holding in. Now you're not afraid to do it. So if I'm in front of a classroom, right, and I'm trying to tell people about privilege, I'm going to tell you about mine. If I'm going to tell you about bias, I'm going to share mine. If I'm going to talk about, you know, your unearned advantage, I'm going to talk about my unearned advantage. And then that way it's not frightening for you to tell me about yours, because you know that I've already outed myself, you know. And I think that level of honesty would be really helpful right about now. I'll do one more real quick, and then I'll let you get out of here if there is one. Yes. I'll do here, and then I'll do there, because that's up to you guys. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had to write it down. When working in a vulnerable community, experiencing gentrification and community members are at risk of displacement and even fear of discrimination or deportation. In that type of environment, how can we bring forth the knowledge of community members to uplift and empower them through, let's say, the lens of education or even advocacy? What type of hands could they play to kind of turn the tides? What advice do you have for those communities?
Wow, well, it's tough, you know. Obviously, right now, we've got millions of people who are at risk of of deportation, at least parts of their families. We have lots of people who, even if they're not at risk of deportation, they're at risk of removal from communities, if not by ICE, by by the economic effects of gentrification, which you referenced, right? So people can be displaced a lot of ways. They can be displaced formally or put across a border, as has happened many times in our country's history and is happening again. They can be put in cages and separated from their families, as is happening now. They can be put on airplanes and sent back, as is happening now, or they can simply be moved out of the community and sort of disappeared, which has happened a lot in the last 20 to 25 years. A lot of people who we just have lost track of altogether, who used to live in urban areas, and then we had these economic renewal programs like Hope 6 that came in during the Clinton administration that was supposed to revitalize these communities, and it did pump some money in, but then what happened is folks couldn't afford to stay in those communities, and we didn't really keep track of where they went. We don't know where a lot of them are. So we're going to have to figure out what to do about that, and I don't have the answers to it, and sadly I don't think a lot of our politicians are even talking very seriously about it. But one thing we do have to do is we have to rally around these communities, and we have to hold them up, and we have to, even if we're not from there and we don't live there, we've got to be there on the front lines defending these communities. You know, there was a really amazing story. I live in Nashville, and outside of Nashville there's a little suburban area called Antioch.